So Natalia, I'm super excited to talk to you today about kind of what's happening, new innovations, new approaches to virtual primary research. So you are a research expert. You are an expert at helping companies get in touch with their customers and get into the brain of their customers to figure out what they're thinking, what they want. But with COVID, that world has changed. You know, you can't bring a bunch of people into a focus group, into a room for a focus group like you used to be able to do. So talk about what's happened now with COVID and what you've seen working and what you see, for the rest of 2021.
Yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Felina. It's always so much fun. Yeah, like every other industry, research has been greatly impacted in a lot of different ways. Some things have stayed the same and some things have changed. What you might find surprising is that there is still in-person research going on. I have actually conducted some of this research, and like everything else with a lot of precautions, right? A lot of masks, a lot of plexiglass, a lot of cleaning. But what I was really surprised as a researcher to find is that I thought, well, who's going to want to come to these things? And you would be surprised, a lot of people, because people still want to be heard. And I think that's important. People, there's a lot of people out there. A lot of people are looking for more income. So they're looking for ways to earn a little bit of extra money. They have a lot of extra time for whatever reasons. And they are still willing to do the in-person research. Now, that's not 100% of the population, obviously. So there have been shifts just like any other business, right? So um, going digital like everyone else, right? Now, I do focus on qualitative research, which is more like you mentioned, the focus groups, having those deep discussions and really kind of diving deep into what people are thinking and believing. And there's always been an online element, even though people weren't that familiar with it. Obviously, we're relying on Zoom-like calls for a lot of our interviews. But there are a lot of other methods. And one word that's kind of really come into the forefront of conversation is asynchronous. And what that means, especially if you have kiddos at home doing distance learning, you've probably heard this word asynchronous learning or asynchronous assignments. All that means is it's really the opposite of live. So with research, we have a lot of online bulletin boards or online diaries. And this is where there's an online platform and you're not talking live like we're doing right now, but we might say, hey, Felina, on Monday, we're going to ask you 5 questions, or we're going to give you some fun activities, card sorting activities, a lot of things that you might actually do in a focus group room with people, but you can do it live. So it can still be very interactive. You can still dive deep. So there are a lot of these online bulletin boards. So qualitative research versus quantitative, which are a lot of the online surveys you're probably used to taking, is still alive and it's still thriving. I think a lot of it is just really convincing the companies and the clients that, hey, this is out there. There's still a lot of interest. And I think now more than ever, business is still going on. Businesses still need to make decisions and they need to make educated decisions with evidence. And that's really where the research comes in. And there's also been a lot of innovations. I want to tell you a little bit about something that I came up with during COVID, along with a partner of mine. And as you may know, my background has actually been in the automotive circles, automotive world. And you can imagine that's extremely difficult to do. In-person automotive research, we would call them clinics, right? Where we would invite a whole bunch of people in to drive the cars, to sit in the cars, tell us all those things. And that's really taken a little bit of a backseat. Some of it's still happening, like I said, with a lot of precautions. But I teamed up with a colleague of mine who's also an automotive moderator and researcher, and we came up with a platform. What we did is we took an idea from the real estate industry. As you know, the virtual home tours. I'm sure you've probably seen them. They're great because you can do a lot of spying on the houses in your neighborhood, right? Or your dream mansion in Beverly Hills. Well, we took a page from their book, right? They're so popular now. It's hard to go in person. You don't want to go into all these homes or drive and all this stuff. So we said, hey, why don't we do the same thing? We actually took a 3D camera And we took a lot of shots, and you can do this with any car and or vehicle, and we took lots of shots both inside and outside the vehicle, almost like you're standing there, just like at a home tour. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan. If you want to focus in on a certain area, you can do that. And it's so much more interactive and fun than if you're just looking at a bunch of, this is the front of the car, this is the side of the car. It gives the respondents more control, and it makes it just more fun. So you're going to get better responses, right? People are going to be much more engaged. And we've been talking to a lot of the automakers. We're getting a lot of positive response with this platform. So it seems to be a very promising kind of future of automotive research. And the great part is we realize it's not going to be an exact substitute for, let's say, a car clinic that we're used to seeing. You're not going to be able to say how comfy the seats were. You're not going to be able to drive the car. But by our estimates, you get about 80% of the insights and the findings for anywhere between 50 to 20% of the cost of doing an in-car clinic, because you're not renting that facility. If you need to make last minute shifts, we need more respondents or we need less respondents, it's a lot more agile. So yes, you are giving up some things. Nothing's going to substitute in person. I think we've all learned that the hard way, right? But there are a lot of ways to work around that and even save. So we think that this platform actually has a lot of legs beyond the pandemic. And as we've kind of discussed, a lot of consumer behaviors that we learned during the pandemic are going to carry on. And we think the same thing with this research, that it's great for the pandemic, but it really has a lot of opportunity after the pandemic.
I love what you're doing with this. What other industries could this approach apply to? Where would you take it beyond the auto industry?
I mean, it can be anything, even in retail. I mean, think about a grocery store. You want to know how things are laid out. Do I want to put the apples in this part of the produce section or whatever? We could do this 3D photography really for anything, any product, any retail space, anything like that, where it's actually somewhere where normally you would do research where you bring in people and they actually have to move around, touch things, interact with things. This gets you a little bit closer to that in-person research. So like I said, retail, if there's a different type of physical 3D product, we can definitely use this platform there as well. And there's one other thing I did not mention about this research. It's really cool. So we kind of talked about the respondent respondent experience, right? But it also doubles as a really great tool afterwards. So normally after a research project, you get a nice little PowerPoint, you get a presentation. But what we can do is we can take this same exact platform and we can actually embed. So if you say, oh, like, look at the corner of the room here, right? Respondents really loved this corner here. We can make little pop-up insights and put them in. And what's great about this is sometimes you're working with engineers or specialists that are just really concerned about their little area of expertise, right? So instead of going through a 100-page PowerPoint presentation that can often be a little bit boring, you're like, these 50 pages aren't relevant to me. We can share this platform. It's really just a URL, and your engineers, your technicians, whoever they are, the specialists that you're working with, they can just go and pinpoint their area of expertise, which is great because they won't get bored. They get straight to the point, and it has really lasting impact, especially if they're highly visual people, right? So again, out with the PowerPoint, we can still have a PowerPoint, but bringing in more visual interactive, not just for the respondent, but also for the team that you're trying to share the insights with.
Yeah, it strikes me as very important because, in larger companies, you've got many people that have their fingers in the project, right? From finance to engineering to, marketing to sales. And so being able to really tailor the results of the findings to each of those departments or people, I can imagine would be extremely valuable.
Yeah, and it just breaks my heart when I do research and these reports, they end up kind of in some folder on a file like the F drive, right? And no one really knows where that is or how to get access to it. But if it's just a URL and it's easy to access, that way, people know where to go to get it and it really lives with them. And really, it's just giving you more ROI on your research dollars. And that's really what everyone wants, right?
Love it.